Talk about low-budget flights. No food or movies? I'm out of here. I like running better. Welcome back, YouTube viewers, to another video. Today's video is very special. One, because it's going to be two parts. But two, because this is on what is my opinion, the greatest thing Marvel has ever produced since the 1960s. Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes. If you haven't seen Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes, I'm just going to tell you, don't watch this video. I mean, if you're watching this video, you've probably already seen the whole show, but if you haven't, go watch it on Disney Plus. I recommend to watch episode 3 to 7 before episode 1 and 2 because they're out of order, but anyways, Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes is probably the most comic accurate Marvel adaptation to ever exist, and it's also the most entertaining, the best animated, the best voice acted. It's great. So for now, in this video, I'm going to go through every episode of the first season. To start things off with, we have Iron Man is Born. This is a great introduction to Iron Man. One, we can see him fighting these really cool Hydra robots called Dreadnoughts, which are just green versions of robots from a Nick Fury comic from 1967. Now that's what you call a deep cut. So this episode is just it's showing Iron Man, Tony Stark flying around being a superhero and how he doesn't want to work with the team. Now this show only exists because of the MCU, so while there are things from the MCU that are here, it's mostly comic accurate. So yeah, Tony Stark doesn't have a secret identity, but this is still a lot more comic accurate than the movies. So in this one, you just get to see that him fight some giant robots and fight Hydra, and that's pretty much it for Iron Man's part. It's a great first part of the episode, but the second part is much more interesting. We see Nick Fury, who has hair, unlike in the MCU, which really bugs me. Nick Fury isn't supposed to be bald. And he goes into this supervillain prison called The Vault, where you just get to see a bunch of cameos of cool Marvel villains that most people probably never even heard of. Namely, Baron Strucker, which you probably remember that one. Well, actually, you probably don't remember Baron Strucker. He was in the opening of Age of Ultron, except he just was there to be a joke and did nothing. In the comics, Baron Strucker came from World War II and was a high-ranking Nazi soldier. And then he just used this life-draining Red Claw thing to steal people's youth so he could stay alive forever. You get to see him in this episode, and he's well played for as few lines as he has. Yeah, I don't really know what else to say about this episode, but it's a really good introduction to Iron Man. Next episode is far more interesting, Hulk versus the World. So, in this show, Bruce Banner actually has a tough life because, yeah, outside of the Incredible Hulk, you never get to see a bunch of drama between Bruce Banner and the Hulk. You never get to see him on the run. But here, it starts off with him. Bruce Banner has a beard. He's tired. And he's just still on the run from Shield and General Ross. He gets to fight the Absorbing Man, which is really cool. And show that even after he's told, "You're getting soft," the Hulk is still not soft. And also, this show definitely has the best Hulk voice. He's played by Fred Tatasciore, who has voiced the Hulk in more things than anyone else, which definitely says something about his performance. We also get to see Hawkeye and Black Widow as S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, just like in the MCU, except unlike in the MCU, Hawkeye actually looks like Hawkeye, which is a nice touch. Oh, and he's much better than he's in anything else. I guess we'll get more into Hawkeye later, but to just start off here is that in the comics, Hawkeye is just kind of boring, and in the movies, he's so forgettable. Here, he's comic relief, but he's actually really funny, and he's still really useful. That's all I'm going to say about him for now. And yeah, we get to see that Black Widow seemingly is working for Hydra and betrays Hawkeye, and he ends up getting locked up. And Bruce Banner also gets locked up in The Cube, another supervillain prison, which houses gamma-radiated villains, which, quick side note, the Hulk is supposed to be a one-time accident. Why are there so many gamma villains? It doesn't make any sense. But yeah, we get an interesting detail that S.H.I.E.L.D. wants to use the Hulk's blood to make more Hulks, which gets expanded on in Season 2, but that's not until way later. Then the Man in the Anthill. This show is probably one of the few times people ever care about Ant-Man. And he's not Scott Lang here, at least not immediately. He's Henry Pym like he was originally in the comics, and he gets his cool comic suit, which I always like. Now, Ant-Man's not great here because He's a pacifist superhero, which his voice actor has said that makes absolutely no sense. He's a walking oxymoron. But he gets a cool introduction of him getting to use his ants to beat up Claw and his gang, which is always cool. The Wasp also gets an appearance to beat up this cool mutant supervillain called Whirlwind, and this is probably the only time I'll ever care about the Wasp. Her costume is much better than it is in the movies or any comic, and she's a lot more memorable and has more of a place on the team other than just being there like she's always been in everything else. We also get introduced to another supervillain prison, the Big House, which is obviously ironic because it's made by Ant-Man to shrink down and fit supervillains in there. And this is where a bunch of supervillains with messed up genetics go. So you get stuff like the Mad Thinker from the Fantastic Four, which is a really nice cameo, or who he actually speaks to. You'll get to see the Grey Gargoyle. And then the end of this episode has a bit with the Black Panther, which is much better than the Black Panther movie ever was. So in this version, it's pretty different from the original comic from the 60s, but it's probably a little better actually. So his father, T'Challa's father, was a Black Panther, and he dueled M'Baku the Man Ape, played by Kevin Michael Richardson because he has to be in this show, as King of Wakanda. And when he's about to win, Claw is in the background and shoots to the Black Panther and kills him. So, and M'Baku becomes the king of Wakanda, and we see at the end that T'Challa has grabbed a new Black Panther uniform and is ready for his journey. And as you might have noticed, these first two episodes, much like the first phase of the MCU, are introducing each Avenger, which is always I really like that. And you get to see them before they become a team, and this is a lot better than the MCU, so you get to care about them more despite getting less time with them. And that takes talent. Then Thor the Mighty. This show is perfect proof why making Thor comic accurate is the only way to make Thor good. Because in the MCU, Asgard is it's a complete mess. I don't. It would take forever to get into. There's a good video by Braden Alberti on the MCU Thor problem. In short, MCU Thor does not sound like Thor. He doesn't get a helmet, which he doesn't always have a helmet in the comics, but he should. He isn't really. He's just not. And then eventually, MCU Thor just becomes dumb comic relief. Loki never really uses his powers or anything, isn't that threatening? But here, no, Loki uses his powers, he's a threat. He and Thor have such great vocal performances. Rick T. Wasserman is definitely the best Thor. And Graham McTavish is great as Loki as well. And Clancy Brown is Odin. So yeah, we get to see Thor's first meeting of Jane Foster, who is a She's in the comics. She was a nurse because Thor disguised himself as the human Dr. Don Blake, and then in the movies she's just a scientist. Oh wow, how interesting. Here she's a paramedic, which I think was probably the best option they could have gone for because there's no more Dr. Don Blake, so it's instead Jane Foster as well as some other guy are helping people who've been attacked by supervillains, and Thor just so happens to drop by to fight the supervillains. And he meets Jane Foster, and he gets a really cool action scene as well. And then he goes to Asgard and fights Loki and the Frost Giants. We get to see a bunch of the Asgardian people. And at the end, Loki gets banished to the Isle of Silence from the first issue of Avengers, but he gets saved by the Enchantress and the Executioner. If you only watch the MCU, you have no idea who the Enchantress is, but we'll get into her later. Great episode, great introduction to Thor. Then my favorite of these 5 episodes, meet Captain America. This is the beginning of the proof why Earth's Mightiest Heroes has the best version of Captain America, and there will never be a better version, at least not in terms of the actor. Ryan Bloom is Captain America. He is to Captain America what Kevin Conroy was to Batman. So it starts off with this cool black and white, I guess, new movie reel of Steve Rogers becoming Captain America and him and Bucky helping the Allied forces defeat the Hydra war machine. And yeah, in this show, they can't say that Captain America fought Nazis because it's a cartoon, which could have just said Germans, but they all have German accents anyways, and I guess this also ties into the MCU, which, can't stop that brand synergy, but this is still a great episode. Because it actually starts off with Kang the Conqueror watching all of this from his time chair in the 41st century, And we get to see this whole final adventure of Captain America. Him, Bucky, and the Howling Commandos, Sergeant Fury's Howling Commandos. Great reference. We get to see all of them actually, and they all get to do stuff even if they don't talk. And they invade a Hydra base where they meet the Red Skull, whose plan here is to use this magic stone to bring to open the portal to the Rainbow Bridge to bring in Asgardian monsters to help Hydra win World War II. That's a pretty crazy, unique idea. It's a lot. I mean, I actually do like the Red Skull in the MCU. You'd know that if you saw my video on the first Avenger, but this is definitely a lot more interesting of a plot. It ties into the show later, so it's important. And here, Bucky actually goes out like a hero instead of just going out like a loser. He and Cap follow the Red Skull, who's trying to escape on a rocket ship with a missile on it. And Bucky kicks Cap off to stop it and salutes him as Cap falls into the water and is frozen in ice. That's a hero's exit. Of course, the Red Skull gets away in an ejector seat because why wouldn't he have one? But then we cut back to Kang the Conqueror, who is watching all of this and finds out that because of Captain America, somehow his future is being destroyed and now he wants to conquer Earth. But now time for what aired first as episodes, because the first 5 episodes originally were split into little microsodes. Okay, yeah. Breakout Part 1. So here, just in this image, I'd like to point out we get a bunch of cameos from random Marvel supervillains you've never heard of. We already mentioned Whirlwind, but then there's some guy from the Serpent Society who, yeah, they're pretty lame, honestly. But then there's the Great Gargoyle, who you might have heard of. And there's Arnim Zola, who, yeah, he was in the movies, kind of, I guess. But then in the background, you see the guy in the red suit. That is the Red Ghost, as in the Red Ghost in the Super Apes, who I don't know if he's even appeared in the comics since 1965 or 1964 even. He's super obscure. He's an old Fantastic Four villain, but they put him in here, and I think that's a really good touch. So this episode's about all the supervillain prisons, all 4? Yeah, I think it's 4. All 4 of them just somehow shut down, and all the supervillains break out, and all the superheroes have to deal with all this crazy stuff that's going on. In short, this is just the Avengers movie, at least as in the big event that brings the Avengers together, except way better. A lot of great character interactions. Well, Captain America hasn't been unfrozen from the ice yet, so this is the original Avengers team from the first 2 issues. Iron Man, Thor, Ant-Man, the Wasp, and the Hulk. So yeah, they all just have to deal with all this crazy stuff that's going on. Then there's Breakout Part 2, where yes, a city floating in the sky happened in Age of Ultron. It's originally from an old Captain America comic, and they did it here because it just looks really cool. So some scientist that called Graviton, he's called that. Okay, he got into 10 years ago. Some guy got into an experiment, and it comatosed him and gave him superpowers. Nick Fury just had him locked up for 10 years. And now he wants revenge on Nick Fury. He wants to conquer the world. Now that's what I call a supervillain. Yeah, quick side note, I like how the supervillains here are portrayed as a lot more classic Stan Lee Marvel. They're a lot more entertaining that way, and they come off as a lot more menacing. So yeah, we're going to see Thor fight Graviton, which is a great fight. Ant-Man and the Wasp have to deal with the supervillains escaping from the big house. Iron Man's armor is broken down. The Hulk has to escape the cube. And they all meet up at the end and defeat Graviton, and then Tony Stark decides that they should all become the Avengers. And that's how this episode goes. It's a really great one, but it also establishes something interesting. So I mentioned there are 4 supervillain prisons because in this we see that yeah, there's a 4th, home for the most dangerous criminals ever. And I like that Zemo is one of these. Yeah, you know, Baron Zemo. No, of course you don't know him. He is a guy who had the same name as in Civil War, except he was not the same thing. Not at all. But yeah, here, because the writing crew actually respected Marvel Comics, he is in the prison for the worst of the worst. And yeah, the Avengers are formed. Okay, now some assembly required. Much like the second issue of Avengers comics, when the Avengers are trying to enjoy their new mansion, the Hulk gets okay, no. In the original comic, the Hulk gets possessed by an alien. Here it's Loki, or well, we'll find out about Loki later. He sends the Enchantress and the Executioner, who she has taken control of the Hulk to fight the Avengers, and that eventually makes the Hulk leave. But one, you get introduced to the Enchantress, who is just this evil sorceress. That's kind of it, but she's a good villain for what it's worth. And there's the Executioner too, who doesn't talk for some reason, but I actually like that he doesn't talk here. It makes him more menacing, especially with his gigantic super-powered axe. And he fights the Hulk. And there's this great bit with the Hulk where he runs away and just sits in an alleyway and has this conversation in his mind with Bruce Banner as he talks about how they were right about me. I am a monster. That was a terrible Hulk voice. And Bruce Banner tells him, it's only true if you let it be. Walk away now and it will be. So while the Hulk decides to save his team, he leaves the Avengers because he thinks they just don't like him, that they're no better than General Ross and Shield, which is sad, but yeah, that's what happened in the comics. And it makes sense. Why in the movies is Hulk just immediately a team player? Everybody's scared of him. He's this giant hulking monster. Why would they just immediately trust him? Why would you immediately trust them? That makes no sense. But it's handled much differently here. There's also just funny moments of the Avengers getting introduced to the mansion by Iron Man, getting to see all the stuff in it. It's always good. Then there is episode 9, Living Legend. The Avengers find Captain America frozen in ice where they wake him up, and he immediately thinks they're some kind of supervillain because he doesn't know he's been frozen for a few decades and tries to beat them up. And they eventually get tracked to outside the Statue of Liberty, where one, we see it, there's a statue of Bucky and Captain America outside the Statue of Liberty. I really like that. And all the people of New York City see Captain America, he's alive, and Captain America's shocked to see the modern world because in the movies, this cartoon, Captain America actually gets to have an honest experience with the modern world. Yeah, why do the movies just hate Marvel comics? I mean, I guess they kind of have Cap not be used to the modern world, but he gets over it so quickly. Not much is really done with it. It's so much better here. Also, he is a good hero. So we find out that since Captain America has reappeared, Zemo has gone to Hydra and told them that he doesn't want anything to do with them anymore because now he just wants to kill Captain America. So he works with Arnim Zola, who's made these giant blob monster things to attack the Avengers while Zemo goes after Captain America and he has this cool fight with him. I also like the touch here is that these days they just say, "Oh, Zemo, Captain America fought him in the 40s." I mean, in the 60s you could just say, "Okay, yeah, he's just in his 50s now." But these days, World War II was so long ago, you'd have to say, "Oh no, it's his grandson or something." But no, they just said that he changed his body so that he would just not age. Hey, it's based on a comic book, and I like that more because it feels more impactful that Cap is actually fighting the guy from World War II, not just his grandson or something. The Cap gets saved by the Black Panther, who nobody knows about the Black Panther. He just gets saved by this mysterious guy, and he asks the Avengers about him, but they don't know about him. And yeah, Cap finally gets to join the Avengers. Great episode. Then Everything is Wonderful, probably my least favorite episode of the season. It's still pretty good. It's kind of bland, I guess. So since has some stuff from the movies in it, Tony Stark doesn't make or sell weapons anymore, which is definitely not a comic thing. That's how he makes his money, mostly anyway. So here it's that he needs more money, I guess, from not selling weapons anymore, so he buys a company of some other guy who he doesn't get to fully explain things to him, of course, which is why the guy ends up becoming a supervillain by getting um experimented on by AIM and turned into the Wonder Man, which I know pretty much nothing about comic Wonder Man, but this design is a lot better, and I like that he's actually a supervillain here. He's this guy made of purple energy who gets to beat up the Avengers, and we also get to see MODOK, who is not a dumb joke like he's in the movies. Well, I guess they still make fun of him because, I mean, just look at MODOK. He still portrays a threat because he is supposed to be this disgusting, terrifying creature thing. And you have Thor and Wasp get to fight AIM. We get to see the cool action scene with Wonder Man at the end, and when he seemingly dies, he gets recruited by the Enchantress and the Executioner as well as Zemo, who actually they went to Zemo at the end of the last episode because they're recruiting him for something. Then Panther's Quest, what the Black Panther movie should have been. Black Panther finally reveals himself to the Avengers after beating them up easily and tells them how he's been studying them and wants them to help him save Wakanda from M'Baku. They do eventually go along with him, except things don't go as they seem, as the team pretty much splits up. Most of them go to find Claw and Hydra, who are harvesting vibranium, and then Black Panther and Captain America go to fight the Man-Ape. Well, really Black Panther, and he gets to beat him up and regain his throne as the rightful king of Wakanda. Except instead of just staying as the king of Wakanda, he tells all his people that they don't need a king anymore. They should be by the people for the people. So he goes to join the Avengers, which I guess after immediately getting his home back, he probably should have stayed, but whatever. I like the Black Panther in the show. And this will probably sound disrespectful to some person for some reason, but I like this voice for the Black Panther way more than the movie version. There's nothing wrong with the movie Black Panther, but this version's a lot more interesting. He's not just another quippy but cool superhero. It's been done 1,000 times. Here he's portrayed as this cool ninja, and they make a reference to some cool old Marvel comics and how Claw had a machine of vibranium turn him into a giant sound monster. Yeah, it's always good to get crazy stuff like that. Then Gamma World Part 1, maybe the greatest two-part episode in the entire series. So, we got to see the leader along with some other Gamma villains earlier in the show. So now we hear that he has kidnapped agents going inside the cube to find out what's happening, and seems to be building some kind of gamma machine that will turn everyone into gamma monsters. Oh, also, Hawkeye did escape since he was captured by S.H.I.E.L.D., but he did escape during the whole breakout story. So he's on the run and ends up coming across the Hulk, or maybe that's in the next episode. Okay, anyway, he wants to go capture Black Widow so he can clear his name. But then he gets caught up in all of this. And we see that the leader has tricked all of the Avengers, caught them in the cube, has turned them into gamma monsters, is going to spread his gamma dome across the whole world. Then Gamma World Part 2, the most supervillain thing ever, the leader takes control of the airwaves to announce his new world order. Yeah, that's a supervillain. And now he's going to make the world perfect and he will be its leader. So Hawkeye could caught Black Widow and could use her to clear his name, but he decides to just leave her behind and go find the Hulk, or Bruce Banner in this case. So, because he's an expert on gamma and science, so he can get him to stop the leader somehow. So Hawkeye and the Hulk have to team up and find the leader, who is being attacked by the one Avenger who didn't get infected by gamma, Thor. Except Thor is getting beat up easily and doesn't even have his hammer. And he also starts asking the leader stuff like, "You call yourself leader. What gives you the right to lead?" And the leader says, "What gives me the right to lead? I am the most advanced mind this world has ever seen." Yeah, again, I just love this Stan Lee 60s crazy supervillain dialogue where all supervillains talk like they're the greatest guy to ever live. I like when supervillains are portrayed as egotistical like this. But then Thor gets enough time to have his hammer come to him, and he's about to use it. But then the Absorbing Man absorbs his power and gains lightning powers. That's a great scene. And then Hawkeye and the Hulk come in to beat the leader, who then pulls out a giant robot mech and tries to fight Hawkeye, Hulk, and Thor, who, of course, they beat him up. and they're able to turn off his machine and save the whole world from its gamma leader's gamma energy. Leader gets arrested by Shield, and Shield asks Hawkeye if he'll join them again, but he says no way. So he and the Hulk rejoin the Avengers, and that's how it goes. But we get one last important detail. The Abomination is obviously a gamma monster, and he just got blown away to who knows where. So at the end of the episode, we find that Zemo, Enchantress, Executioner, and Wonder Man have all, and even the Crimson Dynamo, who's an Iron Man villain, have come to recruit him for something. And now we get to see that in the episode Masters of Evil. Masters of Evil are just the evil Avengers. That's it. And boy, do I wish the MCU built up to this instead of Thanos. This is probably just me, but I can never buy Thanos as a serious threat. When I look at his design in the comics and stuff, I just think, or I know about the stuff like this Thanos copter, so I just see him as a joke villain. I can't take him seriously. But anyways, the Avengers Mansion gets invaded and by the Masters of Evil, and they all easily capture the Avengers by tricking them, not because the Avengers are portrayed as idiots. Take notes, writers of other stuff. So yeah, and except for Black Panther and Ant-Man aren't here, they're off doing something else, I guess. I don't I don't think it's ever entirely clear what they were doing. But anyway, they're gone. So the Masters of Evil have effectively taken over the Avengers Mansion. Zemo gets to gloat in Captain America's face, and Crimson Dynamo and the Abomination just really want to kill Iron Man and the Hulk. Oh yeah, except the Hulk isn't here because they know the Hulk would beat them easily. So the Executioner used his magic axe to send the Hulk to another realm, so he'll be gone. But of course, Ant-Man and Black Panther come in to save the day, combined with freeing the other Avengers to help them. And once the Avengers have the upper hand, the Enchantress says to Thor, "You wouldn't hurt me, would you?" And he says, "Nay." But then he uses the Executioner's axe he uses his hammer to free the Hulk from another realm, and he says, "But my friend might." So the Masters of Evil have to retreat, and the Avengers have won, but now they know they have an entire evil supervillain team after them. Really solid episode. I know I'm kind of rushing through some of these, but there's not a ton to say unless I just went super in depth through every scene. Then 459. A great episode simply because it has Roger Craig Smith in it. I don't think anything more needs to be said. Oh, okay. Oh, and this episode is called 459 because this Kree Sentry robot shows up. And for you uneducated Marvelites, Kree Sentry 459 is from an issue of the Fantastic Four from 1967. Yeah, I think it has shown up a few more times, but yeah, the Sentry is super obscure as far as I know. So anyway, Roger Craig Smith voices some pilot guy, I think. Not entirely clear. He's working with Carol Danvers, who becomes Miss Marvel in this show, not Captain Marvel, and isn't portrayed as some feminist, I can do everything character like in the movies, thank God. And then, so Ant-Man and the Wasp, I guess the Wasp is mad at Ant-Man for, I guess, not putting enough effort into their relationship. Yeah, it's kind of weird, but it's entertaining. So all four of them eventually discover that an alien probe is being sent to Earth, which is the Kree Sentry, and that turns out the pilot guy is a Kree, Captain Marvel. And the Avengers all question him, and he talks about the Kree Skrull War. And because Earth just so happens to be in their line of fire, so a Kree Sentry has come to Earth, and it's invincible. So the only way to destroy it is by removing the bomb inside of its chest that would blow up the entire planet and tossing it into space. It has the same ending as the first Avengers movie, with a guy throwing a dangerous bomb up into space and almost dying, except this episode aired over a year before the first Avengers movie came out. And it's done since I actually care about Cap. Okay, I don't want to insult Iron Man in the MCU because he's not that bad. we're just gonna move on. Oh, but at the end of the episode, Carol Danvers now seems to have some kind of cosmic powers while she's in the hospital. Okay. Next episode, Widow Sting. So, even though Hawkeye's name has been cleared, the Black Widow is still seemingly working for Hydra. So Hawkeye goes it alone. Well, he has to work with Mockingbird, some SHIELD agent, to go invade Hydra Island and capture the Black Widow. And this episode is just a great Hawkeye episode. We get to see how smart he is, how funny he is, how skilled he is. Another really cool scene of how showing how he never misses. And Captain America and Black Panther follow Hawkeye to Hydra Island. And there's this really cool action scene where they fight Hydra, and Hawkeye gets a lot of quips. We get to see that the Black Widow might not be evil because she seems to not like having to nearly kill Hawkeye. And it seems like, yeah, maybe she is a double agent because she seems to have saved Hawkeye's life, except Baron Strucker doesn't know that because she's lying to him. And we also hear that Hydra was going to get a weapon from AIM called the Cosmic Cube, except AIM says it's a failure, so they're not going to give it to them. We also get to see at the end that Mockingbird is brought before Nick Fury. This lady on the right, Madam Viper, or Madam Hydra, whatever she's called, I think it's Viper, and that she is a Skrull. Yeah, that's how it ends. Tease for the Skrulls. Then The Man Who Stole Tomorrow, the beginning of the Kang three-parter. This is a great episode because it teaches a very important lesson. The past isn't just a bunch of old baloney that we should just forget. It's not just those who forget history are doomed to repeat it, which is a lesson we could always learn. It also just shows that Tony and Cap have this argument over. Tony Stark says, yeah, Cap, you might be fine and all, but you're old, you're outdated. Me, my technology, it can do anything, it can do everything. I'm advancing. Yet Cap is saying stuff like, if the old ways required preparation and training, then I think I'll stick with them. And yeah, there's this really funny scene where he tells Tony that outside of your armor, you've never been in a real fight before. You don't know how to fight anyone. So okay, yeah, he's a super soldier, so he'd probably win anyways, but he boxes Tony Stark and knocks him out in one hit. And Hawkeye and Hulk watch and get a good laugh over it. But then Kang the Conqueror invades their mansion and says he's going to kill Captain America. And of course, once the Hulk cleans his clock, Kang teleports all the Avengers to the future and tells them that an action caused by Captain America split Earth's sun, and it also had to do with the Kree-Skrull War from before. Continuity. And Cap is pretty much responsible for the death of the future. This already shows Kang to be way better than he is in the movies, for one thing, or comics. Comic Kang is so complicated. So, on a quick tangent, so there's Doctor Doom. Then there's this story about this pharaoh guy. Yeah, the Fantastic Four time travel and meet this pharaoh called Rama-Tut. And it seems that, he's a descendant of Doctor Doom in the future, and he just traveled to ancient Egypt so we could use his advanced technology to rule. Okay. But then later, in just Stan Lee too, just a year or two later, it implies that Rama-Tut and Doctor Doom are the same man, but in two different ages somehow. And then it also says that Kang the Conqueror is a third version of them. But yeah, again, so Doctor Doom, Kang, and Rama-Tut are the same guy in three different ages of time. I have no clue how that's supposed to work, but that just doesn't exist here. Here, Kang's just a guy from the future. That's it. And while the Avengers don't believe they don't believe that Cap could have done this, he says that Captain America isn't supposed to exist in the 21st century. And Cap says that if he really is responsible, then he has to face justice. This is Captain America, the guy that even if he doesn't want to, if he thinks if he thinks this is justice, then he'll gladly get taken away by Kang and probably killed. Yeah, but Tony Stark is able to stop Kang by remembering that those who forget the past are doomed to repeat it because his time chair may be super advanced, but it's still based on Stark Industries technology from thousands of years before. So Tony is able to win. But we find out that Kang is ready to launch an entire invasion of Earth now, as he does in the next episode, which, as a reference to Kang being Rama-Tut, I guess, in the comics, all these robots look ancient Egyptian. which is a nice detail. So it's pretty much just the Avengers fighting a giant alien invasion, like in the movies, but good, because they're not just fighting a bunch of CGI gray monsters with no personality. And there's none of this Captain America is at the mercy of a few random goons, because that doesn't make any sense. He's Captain America. He's a super soldier. He has years of experience. So, anyways, yeah, that's the episode pretty much. The Avengers fight giant robots, and it looks really cool. Oh, and we find out that Kang is sending robots all over the world, and he's going to. He seems he might actually be able to conquer Earth. Then the Kang Dynasty. Tony realizes that the reason the Avengers can't find Kang is because he isn't on Earth, he's on a spaceship. So the Avengers go in a Quinjet, fly to Kang's spaceship, and get to fight him. Well, except for Thor, who gets knocked out earlier, but it was well done, so I'm fine with it. And just the Avengers try to fight Kang, and he of course beats most of them, and he tells Captain America that I do enjoy the irony that you, a man out of time, thinks he can beat the master of time. And Cap just responds with, I don't think I can beat you, Kang. I think Iron Man can. And Iron Man tells him, it's over, Kang. And Kang just says, you think you can defeat me? And then he gets blasted by Iron Man. And then the Avengers eventually just beat him up and win. And Kang gets locked away in a supervillain prison inside the negative zone. That's a cool detail. And it's surrounded by Kirby Crackle, just like in the Fantastic Four comics. And yeah, so the Avengers have beaten Kang's invasion of Earth, and I guess Kang is locked away. But remember, the event of Cap apparently causing the death of the future hasn't happened yet, and we don't know what that event is because remember, the Korean Scroll War just hasn't quite hit Earth just yet. Okay, then the Casket of Ancient Winters. If you've never seen this show or never read some later Thor comics, you would have no idea who this guy is. This is Malekith Dark. Like the guy from Thor: The Dark World? Of course you don't know, because he is in the Thor: The Dark World. Malekith is the most boring, gray, uh, unimaginative villain ever. He just walks around and does evil things and talks a bit, I guess. Here he's colorful and cunning. Oh, and he's voiced by Quinton Flynn, who, for the Sonic fans in my audience, voiced Silver the Hedgehog in Sonic Generations and some of the Olympic Games. Oh, and he voiced the Human Torch before, so he's a Marvel veteran. So this episode is pretty simple. This Malekith guy has come to Earth, finds this ancient Asgardian relic called the Casket of Ancient Winters, which is going to freeze the entire world. And that's it. Oh, but the Thing and Human Torch from the Fantastic Four get a cameo. But the real highlight of this episode is that there's this running joke about how Thor doesn't understand science and thinks all technology is crazy and baloney. Iron Man thinks magic is stupid and makes no sense. So the whole episode is just them arguing back and forth over which is better, both with of them winning in the argument and also losing it. Until the end, they work together using magic and technology to beat Malekith. And that's it. But there is one thing that happens at the end. Thor tries to go to Asgard using his hammer, except he's blocked away. He can't go home. What's he gonna do now? Then Hail Hydra! The conclusion to the Hawkeye and Black Widow Hydra subplot. That's a mouthful. So, Black Widow comes to the Avengers and says she needs their help because Hydra and AIM are about to go to war now because Hydra thinks that AIM wasn't lying about the Cosmic Cube and that it might actually work. Except AIM hasn't finished the Cosmic Cube, and unlike the comics where it can just do anything forever, here it says it can only be used once. So there's a huge war on who's going to get it first and use that wish. Baron Strucker wants to use it to make a world where Hydra won World War II, and AIM just wants to conquer the world, I guess, which is pretty much the same thing. And the Avengers are caught in the middle. They also find out that Nick Fury is just gone for some reason, and Maria Hill is leading S.H.I.E.L.D., and much like the comics, she's a huge jerk that hates all superheroes pretty much, and she wants the superheroes to work for S.H.I.E.L.D. Oh, and yeah, Hawkeye and Black Widow finally put their differences aside and work together to help defeat Hydra, and yeah, that's about it for this one. There's some great dialogue here, some good action. I love this line from Ant-Man where he's talking to Hawkeye and Black Widow and he says, "Gosh, and I thought Jan and I had problems." It's an enjoyable episode. And Baron Strucker finally gets arrested. There's a great, but the ending especially, I just love this one. Cap and Baron Strucker are about to reach for the Cosmic Cube. They reach for it at the same time, except there's a huge flash of light and nothing happens. The cube didn't work. And then we eventually cut to the Avengers all together in the mansion, and Hawkeye asks Cap, "You almost had the ability to wish for anything. What would you have wished for?" And Cap just says with a smile, "The Avengers defeated Hydra, something I was never able to do in my day. As for the present moment, I wouldn't change a thing about it." Gosh, wouldn't it be nice if MCU Cap were more like that? Knowing that he has to give up his great life in the future to go back to the 40s because he clearly hasn't learned anything. Okay, yeah, great episode of Earth's Mightiest Heroes. Then there is Ultron 5. Okay, movie Ultron is terrible, and that's all I'm gonna say. They made him more human-esque, which doesn't really make sense for him to be human-esque. And his design is awful, and he's not really threatening. But here, he's a comic accurately designed Kirby Crackles guy in his mouth. Kirby Crackles in his mouth, powering him, and he sounds evil. That's what Ultron is supposed to be. Guy that hates mankind and refuses to be human-like at all. So earlier, we find out that Hank Pym just built a bunch of Ultron robots with blue instead of red, because they're good, to be prison guards. But they needed an army against Kang, so we had to teach Ultron the concept of violence. And since he's based on a human brain, he thinks that he has this whole crazy god complex that he has to save the world. Only he can save the world. And he that's it, really. I mean, he seemingly kills Thor. Or no, wait, is that in the next episode? I'm not entirely sure. He kidnaps the Wasp and says that he's programmed not to hurt her since he's based on the brain of Hank Pym, but he wishes he's going to correct those flaws. But the Avengers do manage to defeat him and destroy every single last piece of Ultron. But earlier in the episode, Hank Pym quits the Avengers. He says that since he's supposed to be a pacifist, being a superhero goes against everything he believes in, so he quits. Then there's the Ultron imperative. So as Hank is destroying the last bits of Ultron, we find out that Ultron downloaded a copy of his mind to one more computer that wasn't destroyed, and is going to now hack into S.H.I.E.L.D. and launch nuclear missiles to wipe out all of mankind and all life. So the Avengers have to work together without Thor to defeat Ultron. It's an amazing episode. One, Ultron's portrayed as a threat. I mean, he's going to nuke the entire world. Has a great vocal performance by Tom Kane. Too bad he had some kind of vocal injury, so we can't act anymore. The Avengers, Maria Hill has to put her differences aside with Tony Stark and help the Avengers defeat Ultron. And there's a great scene where we find out that Ultron just controls all technology, or electricity, or electronics, whatever. But Iron Man's original gray suit that he built in, I guess it would be the war in Iran in this case. It was Vietnam originally, but whatever. So I guess the costume he built in the war doesn't have any of that stuff in it, so he uses it to fight Ultron. Thor is saved because he was teleported to some world by the Enchantress. It's not entirely clear. I think that's what happened. I'm not sure how she did that at the exact right time, but whatever. And then he tells her that he doesn't care about her at all and wants to go back to Earth. And she says, "If you love your precious Midgar so much, then fine, join in extinction," or some generic supervillain line. And yeah, he helps turn the tide of the battle, and Ultron is completely destroyed. But he's only destroyed because the Avengers can't beat Ultron. So Ant-Man flies into his mind and beats him with logic. Ultron is based on a human mind. He realizes that what he's doing doesn't really make any sense, so he just shuts himself down, and Ant-Man leaves the Avengers. That's it. Then preparing for the season finale, with the episode with the most 60s Marvel title ever, This Hostage Earth. So Thor wants Iron Man to build him a machine that can take him to Asgard. And Captain America says he saw a machine just like that back in his day, and it worked too. Which was, the machine in the episode Meet Captain America with the Red Skull, that machine, was powered by one of the Norn Stones, which the Masters of Evil are gathering, so they can, I guess, rule all realms. I think that's what their plan is. It's not. It's kind of hard to It's kind of hard to explain what their plan is. So the Avengers have to split up to fight the Masters of Evil and find the Norn Stones. But they are Zemo betrays the Enchantress, so he can get all the power for himself. Of course he would do that. Thor fights him a bit, I guess. And then Thor gets taken to Asgard. He gets transported to Asgard, where he finds out that this whole time everything is and Asgard is now ruled by Loki, which is why he couldn't get back to Midgard, I guess. Let's explain later. Okay, now the fall of Asgard. So yeah, Loki explains that that he just set the supervillain prisons he opened them all so all the supervillains could escape and distract Thor so he could take over Asgard. Then he blocked Thor out from entering Asgard, taking over the nine realms, and is going to rule everything. And the Avengers, including Ant-Man, who just so happens to get involved in all this stuff, get split up throughout the nine realms and have to fight their way to finally get to Asgard and defeat Loki. That's all that really happens here, but it's a great episode. Again, we get to see Loki actually being treacherous and using his powers and being a villain. Take notes, MCU. Oh, and there are lots of cool, different mystical monster designs and stuff like that. Great art. The show had great art direction. I mean, Iron Man gets to meet dwarves who look straight out of the Lord of the Rings, and he gets to beat this giant troll monster. Okay, time for the season finale, a day unlike any other. The Avengers, well, all make it to Loki's castle and fight Loki. Except aside from Iron Man who's not here, and they all, of course, stand no chance against him. And in the probably the most memorable moment in the entire series, as the Avengers are all knocked down and Cap reaches for his shield, Loki destroys Captain America's shield. That's one of those images from this show that just burns into your brain. It's unforgettable. Oh, also, Captain America makes a deal with Hela that if he survives, he can keep his soul, but if he doesn't, then if he dies, she's going to get his soul. And okay, I guess this is kind of out of order since it goes back to the last episode, but one thing I love about this show is all its references to 60s Stan Lee comics, which I've already mentioned before. But when he goes to Hela's dimension, or realm, he sees the ghosts of the Howling Commandos, and he names them too. Percy Pinkerton, Dino Manelli, Rebel Ralston. Yeah, he doesn't name Dum Dum Dugan. He doesn't name all of them, but it's nice to see them all. So yeah, the Avengers are about to get killed by Loki, but earlier in the episode, Iron Man asked the dwarves if they've ever made a suit of armor. So Iron Man shows up in armor made from the same metal as Thor's hammer and gets to fight Loki. And the Avengers are able to get back up, and Cap gets some Asgardian shield to help fight. And Loki goes mad with power and is going to accidentally create Ragnarok and destroy all 9 realms. And the Avengers aren't quite able to hold him off until Odin reappears because Loki was able to take over Asgard because Odin was in his Odin sleep, which he uses to temporarily recharge his power. So he figured that while Odin was asleep, he'd just take over Asgard, which he did. Except now Odin's awake, and Loki was not expecting it. He thought he'd stay asleep forever. So Odin is able to beat Loki, send him to some dimension where he gets eternally tortured by a dragon dripping venom in his eyes. And he's tied to a tree forever. And Odin tells the Avengers that he underestimated mortals and that they are the greatest heroes in the 9 realms. And the Avengers get to return home, happy, celebrating, but Cap gets knocked out by himself, which of course turns out to be a Skrull who says that the infiltration has begun. And that's where the first season of Earth's Mightiest Heroes ends. Maybe I rushed through it a bit, but this is a great season. Probably one of the greatest, definitely the greatest season of any superhero cartoon that's ever been made. It's fantastic. And if you have seen it before, but you haven't seen it in a while, go see it again. It's a great show. It also gives you a much bigger appreciation for Marvel comics, which is always important. I mean, well, actually, you'll like this show a lot more if you've read old Marvel comics, but you also see how bad the MCU is if you like this show. So next week I will get into season 2, but I didn't want this video to be too long, so that's all I gotta say for now. But just a quick question. What's your favorite episode of Earth's Mightiest Heroes first season? Do you have a favorite character, or what do you think of the show? So, that's all for now, and as always, keep on juicing!